I've always known about the Metroid series for a while now. It's a long-running series selling millions of copies. My friends always talk about the game series, and I've always seen the bidding war at GDQ on saving or killing the animals. But for the longest time, I've actually never beaten any of the games. Hell, I've never played one longer than an hour and a half. And for years, it sort of stayed this way. Me just knowing that the games existed. But then, Nintendo's 2021 E3 presentation happened. During it, Metroid Dread was announced, the first Metroid game in like 11 years. I remember watching this trailer and just thinking to myself, dang, this looks so cool. If only I enjoyed the Metroidvania genre. Which, after a couple moments, I thought, wait, why don't I like Metroidvanias? I like science fiction, and Metroid is clearly science fiction. Was I wrong about the series? And so this sparked a new interest in me to see if there was anything in the games that I missed. Maybe after replaying them, I can either change my opinion or affirm my opinion about the genre. I guess I just needed a solid answer. From my understanding, Metroidvanias are games that take place in a large, interconnected world, where some areas are locked behind power-ups or items that you can get. And the player's main drive is exploration and making new discoveries. It's not like I haven't played these types of games before, but thinking back, I only really enjoyed half of the Metroidvanias that I actually played. I really could not get into the original Super Metroid. I tried my hardest to like Hollow Knight, and I gave up on Axiom Verge. But on the other hand of the spectrum, I adored the two Ori games, I loved Dust and Elysian Tale, and I like Jedi Fallen Order, which is technically a Metroidvania. After looking at all these Metroidvania games that I played, I think I can boil down the 3 reasons why I just don't enjoy the genre. Number 1, these games are usually very vague in their narrative. There isn't really enough of a hook at the beginning of the game for me to get truly invested on what I'm doing and why I should care. Number 2, because these worlds are interconnected, this usually means there's going to be a lot of backtracking between these same places in the game. Lastly, number 3, and my biggest reasons for not liking the genre, is due to the game prioritizing exploration, there is little to no handholding given to the player. It's up to the player to decide where to explore. But because of this, I end up feeling a lot more lost than I am feeling like I'm exploring something, leading me to have this feeling of not knowing whether or not I'm even progressing in the game. Even with all that, I decided to stream my entire playthrough of the Prime trilogy on Twitch. I have little to no exposure on the game series, so I feel like my opinions will be a lot less biased on these games. Okay, I take that back. I did play a lot of Prime 3 as a kid, but only the first hour and a half repeatedly. Now, originally this was going to be a giant video with my opinions on all 3 of the Prime games, but after doing some pseudo recording, I realized that this would be an hour and a half long video, so I decided to make this one primarily about Prime 1. Now with Prime 1, I'm going to talk about it from start to finish, kind of similar to a walkthrough, explaining how the game interacts, if at all, with my 3 grievances about the game, as well as anything that I enjoyed or that I just didn't like about the game in general. At the end, I will give the game 2 separate scores ranging from 1 to 10. One of the scores will be my enjoyment of the game, and one of the scores will be what I think of it as a game. Even since when I was little, this is just how I graded games that I played. An example can be with Sonic 06. It's an objectively shitty ass game, but I would be lying if I said I did not enjoy playing it. So then, let's get started. I had no idea how Metroid Prime was going to be like. In fact, the only thing I knew about it was that it was going to be a first-person shooter. But before we move on, I do want to mention another thing. Because my idea for making these videos happened in the middle of playing Prime 2, I sort of lost half my footage for Prime 1 because I actually took too long to download the VOD from Twitch. So, yeah. The start of Prime 1 was a very concise, albeit vague text. Samus receives a distress call from a station orbiting the planet Talon 4, and she goes down to investigate. Okay, so part of my reason 1 is checked off here, but not entirely. I'll get to that later. She lands on the station, and so begins the tutorial of the game. And already, I have something to say. The controls are just whack. Because this is still very early on in the first-person shooter lifetime, this game actually uses tank-like controls, meaning that holding forward and back will actually move you in that direction, but hitting left and right will turn you in that direction. To aim up, you have to hold down the right shoulder button. Samus will then plant her feet down, and now you can freely aim. But for some reason, aiming up and down is just so much slower than aiming left and right. It just takes forever to reach the same distance. I mean, it's fine right now, there's nothing really going on, but it becomes such a big problem when the game introduces aerial enemies. There is a lock-on feature by holding down the L button, and you will lock onto a target. This does help with the weird aiming, at least somewhat. Also, while locking onto a target, you can actually hit the B button to do a quick dash in a direction. Strafing exists too, but to do that, you have to hold down the L button without locking on anything. But for like half the game, I actually didn't know it existed until a viewer told me how to set it up. That is, you strafe without locking on target? Okay, so I've been reading up on that. I can lock onto targets. I literally cannot strafe. I don't know why. It has to be configured in Dolphin? Hold on a goddamn second. This would have made life so much easier. Listen, after almost a decade of playing first-person shooter games, I legitimately could not get used to this. It's not like Retro couldn't have done the twin-stick control scheme. I mean, Halo came out a couple months beforehand. Many times when I try to look around, I would accidentally switch beams mid-fight using the C-stick. The C-stick in this game is reserved for switching beams, one in each cardinal direction. Each of them have a little passive too. The power beam is the basic shot, where you can press A to fire, or hold it down to get a charge shot. This is the same with the other beams as well. The ice beam is slow but can freeze enemies, the wave beam can disable mechs and stun enemies, and the plasma beam can erase people from existence. The B button is also used for missiles. Now, pressing the face buttons instead of the trigger was fine for me, only because my thumb was now not on the stick and I could just freely press any of these. Continuing into the station, it teaches you a lot more things, like using the morph ball to get into hard to reach places, scanning things to activate elevators, and how there is a room that gives you a map of the area. I really enjoyed this section of the game. It was very fun, it was linear, and it had a really cool escape sequence at the end of it. Samus finds Ridley, and he kind of just stands there looking evil before going to the planet. Samus giving chase. And with that, we finally land on Town 4. Now, this is where my motivation for playing the game sort of wavered. Yeah, I landed on Town 4, but now I was asking the question, what do I do? You could say to stop Ridley from doing whatever he's doing, but I have no real indication on what this whatever is. I'm sorry, but chasing someone for the sake of chasing someone doesn't really feel natural to me. It feels like I'm playing a Mario game.
I did not think the story in this game was presented in a good way. The only method to even understand the basics of the story is by scanning data logs scattered throughout the world. But these things are everywhere, meaning you can completely miss very important context. Even now, the only thing I really know about the story is that the space pirates want an energy resource called Phazon.
But now this is where I do what I normally do in these games. Explore and hope I find something. And what I found was the Chozo Ruins. I liked walking through this area. The aesthetic was pleasing and the music was just so calming, and it's kind of iconic. Even now when I walk, this music just sometimes plays in the back of my mind, just do 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 do. Navigating these ruins, however, was an issue. Navigating most of this game actually was an issue. And this is due to the in-game map. The map in this game is not good. It's presented in this isometric view rather than perspective view, making it very awkward to see which room is in front without rotating the view and screwing with your sense of direction. The most annoying thing is that doors will only show up on the highlighted room, meaning to figure out where you can use your new upgrade, you have to open up the map and go room by room to find a door you can unlock. I spent most of my time in the mid to late game on this map, and I was actually very close to giving up. This was until okay. This is the hint system, and my goodness, it was a godsend. Essentially, if the game detects that you are lost, it will tell you something along the lines of, oh, we detected a Chozo weapon. Oh, we detected seismic activity. Oh, we found your wallet in this room. And then it'll point you on where to go. If it's in a place that you haven't explored, then it will just place a floating room on the map. So now you have a destination, but you still have to form your own path. I think this is what I found to be my motivation during Metroidvanias, just having a set goal that I can always see. The hint system does take quite a bit for it to kick in, I think around 10 to 15 minutes of just wandering around. But with the way the game is structured, I found myself relying on the hint system to kick in, otherwise I just would not know where to go. Side note, there is a way to turn the hint system off, but like, why would I? What is in the world anyway? The game is filled to the brim with secrets. Some are required, but 90% of them are actually optional. Some of these optional ones are missile expansion upgrades that increases the amount of missiles you can fire, health upgrades which increases your health by 99, and even more hidden upgrades like ice missiles. These were very fun to find and collect, at least in the beginning and the middle of the game. I was always happy to get an upgrade considering how weak I was, but very soon the journey started to outweigh the reward. Like going through these elaborate 2-minute jumping puzzles, only to get a missile upgrade. It got to the point where unless it took like 10 seconds to get a missile upgrade, I just started walking past a lot of these upgrades because it just wasn't worth my time. Now, health was different. I was taking a lot of damage all the time, so I always went out of my way to grab health upgrades. The bosses of this game were very fun and really unique looking too. The tutorial boss was fun. The ice monster was cool too. I lost footage of it. The rock boss in Fendrana was interesting to fight because at this point I actually still didn't have the ability to strafe. I kept on getting hit, but I was creating strategies on how to deal with it. Out of all footage I lost, this was the most painful because it was just very interesting to see how I played this fight with this weird handicap that I put on myself. A boss that I just thought was okay was the Mega Pirate because it just felt like a waiting game. His hand would suck up anything, so I was just sitting there charging for half the time, waiting for my chance to shoot. Okay, small tangent, but this is where I started to really notice something about the enemies in this game. All of their heads are looking straight at Samus, so essentially, you the player. Every single one. It didn't click with me with other enemies, mostly because they were smaller and I wasn't locked onto them. It added this sort of uneasiness feeling into the game, and that's okay. Metroid always was a game that incorporated a little bit of horror, and this detail added to the experience, and I guess in a positive way. Once the Mega Pirate's defeated, the whole world is open to you now, thanks to the Phazon suit upgrade. And going through this world is tedious. Besides the navigation, the amount of backtracking in this game got on my nerves so much. Like, I reached a door that needed the plasma beam, but in order to get it, I had to go back to the Magmore Caverns, go do an actually fun spider ball track, get the beam, and then go all the way back to the door, and then I can finally progress. This was not a one-time occurrence. This happened many times throughout the game in different areas. This was actually one of the shorter ones. It started to feel more like the game was padding time than adding to the game experience. Getting the shortcuts didn't help either, as now most of my time was spent looking at the map, trying to figure out the shortest path from A to B. It also doesn't help that enemies respawn when you enter rooms. Yes, some enemies are just small bugs that you can kill in like 2 shots, but if I have to listen to that goddamn Ghost Chozo music one more time, I am going to scream. Okay, now with all this complaining about the navigation and the backtracking, this next point that I have is going to be kind of confusing and a bit hypocritical. I enjoyed the Chozo artifact hunt. I think it was done in a fun and interesting way. You have to get 12 items scattered throughout the world to open the door to the final boss. But the game gives you clues on where to find them. You have to scan these totems. My favorite one was one where you had to go to a room with towers to find a hidden area you can explode. And once the tower falls, the artifact is yours. This felt great. It felt like it was an actual scavenger hunt, and that I was using these clues to find them. Made me feel good. My least favorite was a hidden door that required a power bomb to open up. I spent all my bombs on wrong areas in this room, and once I found the right place, after looking it up, I had to go back and forth between 2 different rooms, hoping that one enemy would spawn a power bomb pickup. This took like 7 minutes. But after I got all 12 and went back to the Chozo Cradle, Ridley comes back and decides to fuck shit up. Now Ridley was initially easy. Once he landed, there was a point where he got me stuck into a corner and just continued to rail on me. Get off of me. Until he landed, I took no damage. Then all of a sudden, 2/3 of my health was gone. This is what we call, in the scientific community, fucking bullshit. Also knowing that he had a move that caused my lock-on to be disabled, and it just takes so long with these tank-like controls to turn and find him again. But hey, I killed him, he falls into Talon 4, and he was never seen again. The crust opens up and down we are into the Metroid breeding grounds. I like how this place looks, but it just sucked to go through. It's a small platforming section where you have to get to the top, but with Metroids. Now the Metroids here never stop spawning, and you can't ignore them either because they just mess up with your platforming. The tank-like controls don't help here either, because if the Metroids don't make you fall, missing platforms trying to dodge them will. The final boss is the titled Metroid Prime, and the reason why all the whack things on Town 4 is happening. I don't know, maybe I missed that one important log to explain all of this. This is the only boss I straight up didn't like. The gimmick of this fight is that the Prime switches colors, indicating which beam will actually hurt it. It's fine on its own, but the hitbox of the Metroid Prime is this tiny head which moves erratically. This makes it so you kind of have to hope to deal damage. When it's either yellow or white for the power and ice beam respectively, I resign myself to the fact that its health bar will just not go down. There is also another attack where it just charges straight at you with a nice telegraph. What isn't good about the fight is that the Prime becomes indecisive and doesn't know which color to choose, causing me to flick the C-stick in every direction trying to find the right beam to deal damage. And then also he decides to charge without any sort of telegraph, sometimes after doing this seizure-inducing changing. In my first attempt, I only had 3 bars of energy going into phase 2. The Metroid Prime sheds its exoskeleton and becomes the Prime Essence. Now the Essence is fast, more durable, and is unable to be damaged by traditional means. And it's a better boss fight. It moves through different wavelengths. You have to change your visors to find it to actually be able to attack it. And sometimes it releases this excess energy called Phazon, and you have to stand in it in order to deal damage to the boss. The tank-like controls make this process kind of awkward because you have to move into it, be planted still, turning, hoping it doesn't attack you and push you out of it. Later in the fight, the boss also spawns these Metroid ads too, and these guys caused me to get my first and only game over. It's still crazy to me that my first death in this game was to the final boss. Even the rock monster didn't cause me to die with my inability to strafe. But on my second attempt, I entered into phase 2 with more health and beat the Prime Essence. I ended the game with 59% completion after 10.5 hours. Now, after all this, what are my thoughts? I don't see myself playing Prime 1 again, at least not for the foreseeable future. Sure, I liked some parts of the game, like the first-person shooter in this was fun, the boss fights were fun, using the beams on certain enemies was also very cool, but the actual exploration, navigation, and backtracking almost killed my experience with the game. But it definitely felt like it succeeded on what it was trying to do, being a good first 3D Metroid game. Now, in terms for a score of my enjoyment, it would have to be a 6 out of 10. Yes, I liked more parts than I hated, but it was very close. But as a game, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. It felt like a Metroidvania, and it did what it did right. Now, like I said at the beginning of this video, I did plan this to be all 3 Prime games, but because of how long Prime 1 was, I'm going to have to split this into 3 parts. But I already have the footage for Prime 2, this time in its entirety, and the script already outlined. So I don't know when it's going to be, but I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.